So Andrea called me yesterday and said that I can talk about anything I want. So I was going to talk about anything I want, but I thought it'd be relevant to talk about something to do with crowdfunding today. So, I think Jill is actually she had the right title for a session, especially relevant to empowering crowds. So I've actually just borrowed her title, and I'm going to make it my own. So I'm going to talk about generally crowdfunding and talking about what it means actually to do crowdfunding and use crowdfunding, and also the benefits of actually accessing crowdfunding more than just the funds that you receive. So I put it down to five key ways that I think it's valuable, and not only in terms of funds. So to start with, all right. So the first one. So this is something I learned quite quickly, actually. So I've been pretty much running Pozible since 2010, when we founded the platform. We were one of the first in Australia. And actually, we facilitated about 13,000 projects, actually, since we launched. So I quickly realized that there's a massive power with, actually, the strength in the numbers of getting people involved in things. And as a startup as well, it's very important, actually, that you form the right team behind an idea or a project or even a future company. So I quickly realized that crowdfunding is very valuable, actually, to actually form a team. So from the very outset, if you have an idea, putting everybody in place, actually, to pretty much run a business. With crowdfunding, you're having to become an expert in marketing, PR, communications. You're thinking about financials, business model, making hopefully or even breaking even with this project. So this is pretty much critical, actually, in the success of a campaign. But afterwards, you'll actually know what team you have that you want to continue with. If there was somebody a bit slack, it's a bit like your unit class. If you're in a group and there was somebody a bit slack, you pretty much didn't work with them again ever in university. So in the same way with crowdfunding, afterwards, hopefully you've formed hopefully a team of 3 or 4 people to cover off all bases of running that project. And afterwards, you will know which ones you want to take for the future. I have a few examples here, actually, of individuals, actually, that wanted to actually form a team and actually put together pretty much a collaborative kind of project where one was a social impact project. I don't know, has anyone seen these posters around Australia? Real Australians say welcome, or the Aussie pictures. Pop your hands if you've seen them. Oh wow, okay, this is in Melbourne, there'll be a lot more of you guys. So this was a campaign by Peter Drew from Adelaide, and he pretty much put together a campaign, and he's done several campaigns like this. And pretty much you pre-purchase one of these posters, and it's your job actually to put it up somewhere. So you're obliged, whenever you purchase one, that you have to actually display it somewhere. And then secondly, we have Custom Commune. These guys started a trend of, I suppose, collaborative kind of spaces where people pretty much get together, split the costs of say, rent and space, and use the spaces as everybody wants to use it. In the case for Custom Commune, they're using it for a motorcycle workspace. And you can see that they're quite significant successes, and we're talking, for Peter Drew, I know that he's probably 1,500 to 2,000 people involved in his projects. So he's formed a team right across Australia to help him in a social campaign. Custom Commune, I know this is their second campaign, and they've got, I think it's about 600 to 700 people actually involved in that space. Secondly, if anybody has listened to me talk before, I'm pretty obsessive about word of mouth and how to create word of mouth with anything that you do. This is pretty much critical if you want to get social engagement for a campaign. And generally, you want with any campaign is to create an awareness, a general awareness of a project or an idea. And crowdfunding, especially afterwards, hopefully you'll have hundreds, thousands, potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of people around Australia know about your project or campaign. The campaign on the right here, Henry Cook from ANU, these guys actually launched just last Wednesday. They managed to reach their target of 45,000, I think from about 600 people last Wednesday. And they continue actually to get much more coverage, a lot more exposure for this as a project. So if anybody knows what these parrots are, these are the orange-bellied parrots, a Tasmanian, I think they're called the swift parrot. But they're incredibly endangered at the moment. And they've been talked about quite a bit in the media as well. So word of mouth can sometimes actually lead to some media coverage as well. So I've got an example here. David, he's actually a pretty normal guy. He's actually very shy and nervous, which doesn't look like it in this picture. But he put together a documentary called Big in Japan with a few of his friends. And they went to Japan to seek fame. So David here, as you can see, wanted to learn actually what it takes for someone to make it big in Japan. So he studied quite a few Australians actually that went over there and they became famous. So there's some quite odd characters, to say the least, if you get to see this documentary. So generally, creating awareness and creating a buzz around a campaign is critical, not only within your campaign, but afterwards, you have a very valuable asset in terms of exposure. Thirdly, and this is, I think this is going to be very important actually in realizing the value of potentially equity crowdfunding in the future. So whenever you've got an idea, you've actually got a business, looking in the future to become, I suppose, more sustainable and even scaling that business, loyalty actually becomes pretty critical for a brand, especially a consumer-facing brand. So I'm using 4 pillars as an example because I know personally that when I see or I hear someone ordering, especially in my groups, if they're ordering a gin and tonic, or if they're even just talking about gins, I'm the one that firstly says, "Oh, have you heard of 4 Pillars?" 4 Pillars used us 3 years ago, and they've been phenomenal at building a very, how would you say, engaged group of people that really are ambassadors and supporters of this brand. And they call us batch number 1. If anybody's a gin fan, they might have learned this. But so I'm finding, like, even last weekend, I looked at myself. Somebody was taking an order, and I think it was a cocktail actually, and the waitress asked, "Would you prefer 4 Pillars or Melbourne Gin Company?" I said 4 Pillars straight off, you know. So that's the loyalty in me to 4 Pillars, and anybody that supported these guys from a very early stage will have that loyalty to the brand. And if you're buying in the shop, or if you're at Dan Murphy's, you see that as the option against 10 other brands, that's the one you pick because that's the one that you've backed from an early stage. So there's incredible loyalty from this. And I think you will see this with equity crowdfunding more and more as well. So risk. Generally, anybody that goes into business knows pretty much the level of success is pretty much against them. So generally, you'll see 4 out of 5, probably 9 out of 10 businesses fail. But this is a very effective way of actually quickly working out if a project or an idea or a business idea is actually has legs. These 2 campaigns actually were part of an incubator in Sunshine Coast called Grow Coastal. And interestingly, Pete here, he was going to the markets pretty much every week. And he was actually asked to be part of this year program to see if they could scale or build this as a business. So what he does is actually he creates the sous vide lamb and vacuum packs it and sells it at the markets each week. he wanted to actually find out if this was a scalable business or a good prospect of actually making, hopefully, a more sustainable career for him, and not be reliant on him every week to actually sell. So he actually put up this year campaign, and he was very reluctant in doing it. But in the space of probably 2 months, he was actually able to say whether it's a valuable, scalable business to take into the future. Your mate's a similar case, but these guys had pretty much been giving free beer to everyone in Sunshine Coast for about 6 months. They were actually working out if people would buy it. So they put it out there, and of course they created a lot of goodwill in the market, but they were actually testing to see if they've actually got a product or something that people would purchase. I think I'm moving too fast, am I? I'm on to my last one, yeah. This one's worth actually spending a bit more time on, actually, because this is, for me, is one of the most phenomenal case studies of crowdfunding. And it's a story of equity crowdfunding, actually, and they were actually the earliest adopters. So Brewdog was pretty much the first to raise under, I suppose, the supervision of the FDA in the UK. So they did the first raise back in 2009, the end of 2009. And their first raise was pretty successful, actually, and I think they had some backing from the Scottish government to pretty much launch this as a concept. So being able to raise investment from their customers or from their fan base. They created a new community group called Equity for Punks. And they went out to ask their customer base, would you help us support and raise $1 million to expand their business? In their first raise, they got over 1,000 investors. I think they raised slightly over £1 million through that seed investment. Since then, they've done 4 subsequent raises, and they're currently in their 5th raise. They've raised over £41 million, and as of just a few months ago, actually, they took private equity for the first time at a $1 billion valuation. So the lessons that can be learned from this, I've pretty much put it into 4. One, they've been able to increase or even take pretty much control of the craft beer industry in the UK with a massive 65% market share. There's pretty much no other craft beer globally has been able to secure that kind of market share in one country. Obviously, money, very valuable, but look at their community size. They have 51,000 people that is invested into the success of their business. That's pretty massive in any business, any public company even. But they've got a community that's engaged. They have a community group, all called Equity for Punks, and they're all rallying behind this brand and company. And a company that size, with that kind of investor base, they can do whatever they want. They have 51,000 people that will just, you know what, I'll get behind it as well. So these guys have launched a chain of bars right across the UK. And also, I think recently they launched a hotel chain. This is a craft beer company, yeah. So this is the kind of examples of, I think, what can be made from what getting a lot of people actually involved in your business can mean. Lastly, I believe that this can actually increase or drive or accelerate the growth of companies in terms of revenue and profitability. And I know that Brewdog has done both of these with their business, accelerating and growing than pretty much any other craft beer company globally, at least in the last few years. So they're my 5 ways, I think. So looking at first team, building and knowing that you've got the best team during and after the success of a crowdfunding campaign. Secondly, we have, does anybody remember? What was it? Word of mouth, yes. Okay, I needed help actually, so. So word of mouth, again, again, critical for the success of a campaign, but raising that awareness afterwards and having everyone, at least after the campaign, talking about it and building awareness of it. I've got loyalty. Increasing the loyalty of your from your customers into your product or brand or idea. Risk, reducing any risk you have by pretty much ensuring that you have validated the product and you've got a good product fit for what you're doing. And lastly, strength. There's strength in numbers, strength in the value of having people invest into the success of your business. So that's my 5 ways. If you want to, I don't think we have questions actually, but if you want to get in touch with me, this is my contact details and email.